Our speaker today is Mr. Wesley Bell. Mr. Bell is the St. Louis County prosecuting attorney. He was elected in 2018 and has served as prosecutor for 2 3/4 years. This session is a continuation of the previous session with Mr. Bell on September 26th. This second session had to be delayed due to scheduling problems. The subject for both sessions is justice for all. In this session, Mr. Bell will we are encouraged to ask questions of Mr. Bell. I couldn't resist early in the week, and I submitted some questions for Mr. Bell, who he'll start with. But other than that, he will encourage you to ask questions. This time, I'll turn it over to Mr. Bell.
And again, I'm going to ask, since I'm speaking and distance is okay, to take my mouth and make sure no one is uncomfortable. And I do want to thank St. Timothy's for inviting me again to come in and talk to you all. And as we talked about before, this time we're going to get into the questions a lot sooner. And so I'll start briefly just by again reemphasizing our philosophy with this particular job, and again it's very straightforward. With respect to serious and violent crimes, we're going to be aggressive. We're going to prosecute those cases and make sure those individuals are held accountable. And with the nonviolent, low-level offenses where individuals are just struggling with substance use disorder, mental health issues, and are deserving of a second chance, we want to give them the help that they need, and that's our philosophy. And I'll say this: I think last week, as we were discussing, was an example of that philosophy. Many of you knew the Catholic Supply murder and assault. That case, we convicted that individual. And working with those living women who had been victimized and their families, and Ms. Smith, whose family was there, she was deceased, reminded me of why we do this job. It's to bring justice to families in situations like that. And so I was going to get into these questions. Is that how you want me to do it? And then we'll open it up. So I got 6 questions. And so I'll start with those, and I can answer those pretty quickly. And so the first question was essentially providing examples of the person's with our diversion program in terms of crimes with which they are charged. So I guess that's going to, what kind of cases are we charging or not charging with respect to diversion, and just kind of explaining that from a big picture standpoint. And so our diversion program, so there's two sides to the diversion program. There are the treatment courts, which are administered by the court. So the judge that's assigned to diversion is over the treatment court side. And so generally thinking about individuals charged with low-level crimes, you have some who are charged with low-level crimes, but they might be, maybe there's a history there of several of arrests and just more concerns, and you might want the supervision of a judge on those. And then you have your first-time offenders, the ones who you're not really concerned with respect to reoffending or hurting someone, but they just need help. And so those who need more supervision, we have the treatment side where it's more structured. The judge is supervising that, and essentially they work through this program through graduation. Then you have what's what we call the prosecution-led diversion, and those tend to be and getting to the crux of this question, 80% of our prosecution-led, our pre-charge participants, meaning we try to catch these individuals before a charge so we can help them and they can avoid even having the arrest, much less the conviction. And we're talking about your first 80% of these are possession cases, small amounts of drugs, marijuana, something like that, not selling, not aggravating circumstances with guns. With someone caught with a small amount of drugs, they would be eligible for this particular program. And the remaining participants, so 80% are simple drug possession, and the remaining are things like forgery, property damage, things of that nature. So you get the idea that the low level, these nonviolent individuals, these are the individuals that we are getting into our pre-charge program. And we're talking about it. And as you know, in Missouri, we have about a 45% recidivism rate or reoffender rate. Of that bucket of people in our pre-charge program, our treatment courts, we're talking an 8% recidivism rate. So what that means is we're talking 92 to 93% success rate. These individuals are not reoffending. And so these are it's working. And again, and I may have said this last time I was here, I'm not taking credit as if I invented this. We looked at what other jurisdictions were doing, what they were doing well. We created a program that matched, that we thought would fit this community, and that's what we're doing. Yes, sir.
I understand you say it's working, but is it working because you choose the right people to go into the lenient program? Or is it that in the way you work the program and institute the program, that you keep them on the right track? These are two different definitions of it's working.
Right. And I think that's a really good question. And so for us, we're not picking and choosing based on, well, we think this person would be more successful, because, you know, oftentimes the person who you look at and say, man, this is going to be an uphill battle, uphill climb, those are the people that need the help the most. And so if someone fits that criteria, they haven't been charged with any serious or violent offenses, they are, you know, they've been charged with some low-level offenses. We're not seeing a history of just arrest after arrest, because that might be either the treatment side or just traditional prosecution. We're going to put them in that program. And so and it took us about 6 months to get this off the ground when I got in the office. So in about 2 years, you're talking a bucket of about 1,200 people who are either being evaluated, treated, or successfully treated our program that make up that 8% recidivism rate. And so,
that is remarkable.
you know, and again, we know by looking at other models that when individuals get the support that they need, the tools in the toolbox, they succeed. And that's essentially what we're doing. So to me, it's common sense, but I think it's important to track the data to make certain that it's effective. So I'm gonna, okay, no, I think that's perfect as questions. And then when I don't have a question, I'll get back to one of the questions that was sent to me. Yes, ma'am.
I was just wondering what kind of support you're able to offer people in that program. What are the things that you
And so do I need to repeat it for? Okay. What we did was we created, and let me rewind. So I've been an attorney for 20 years, but one of the jobs that I did prior to this is I headed the criminal justice department at St. Louis Community College, the Florissant Valley campus. And we had a criminal justice advisory committee. And that committee were members of the criminal justice stakeholders, if you will. And so every year we would meet with them once or twice a year, and we would present our program to them. And because we wanted to make certain that we were giving our students the skills they need for jobs. So we had people that represent the different types of jobs in the criminal justice field. And so, light switch moment, when I got into this office, I'm like, you know what? I think that's a great idea for our diversion program. It's like, let's get the stakeholders at the table so that we can so that when we have an individual because they didn't teach me how to treat substance use disorder in law school. So when we have an individual, we have the experts at the table that can say, this is what we should be doing with them. And so our first meeting was with Dr. Holmes from Affinia. She's the assistant, our senior vice president. And so we talked about, okay, we want to have beds earmarked for these individuals, because oftentimes a judge is looking at someone and they're saying, well, they got this drug problem or they got this mental health issue, and I don't want to lock them up because this isn't a serious crime. But if I let them out, they're high risk for reoffending and coming right back. So they have this conundrum. And so what we're able to do now is say, Judge, we have an option for you. We can get this individual, and it's not going to cost anything because this is what Affinia is funded to do. We can get this individual on the treatment so you don't have to lock them up. And so what our healthcare experts told us is that, well, if a person doesn't have a job, they're more likely to relapse. Not to mention, relapse is a part of treatment. Prior to us, someone relapsed, they're kicked out. And, you know, we revisited that. What we do is we look at what the experts say. Is this person putting a good faith effort, although they relapse? Yes, then keep them in. And if that's the advice of our experts, and if it's not, they're not making a good effort, then yeah, they're gonna get kicked out. But if they don't have housing, they're more likely to relapse. If they don't have, you know, it's one thing to have a job, but you got to know how to keep that job. Some of us assume that we learn professionalism coming out the womb, but no, we have to, that's something that we're taught. I call it the Chick-fil-A model. You know, one thing they do great is service. You'll see that line wrapped around the corner and you're still out of there in 3 minutes and with a smile on their face. And a lot of our young people don't understand these soft skills. So we wanted to have a committee that was able to treat individuals individually, if you will, to make certain. So when we see someone, hey, they have a drug issue, okay, well, we can treat that, but they also need a job. They need job skills. And we have over 40 partners now where we can say, hey, we can look at this individual holistically and give them the treatment that they need. And so that's been our approach. And I'll say this, that's one thing that we've done that no other prosecutor's office is doing. And that is one of the things that is helping that 8% recidivism rate, is because we're able to treat these individuals as individuals, as opposed to a cookie cutter model that doesn't always work, if that makes sense. Okay, I'm gonna go back unless I see a hand. Are the persons in the program entirely relieved of any penalties for their crimes? So all of our diversion programs, it's like the carrot and the stick. We reserve the right to prosecute. So that's the stick that we have with individuals, is we say, hey, we're gonna give you the opportunity to get involved in this program, to get treatment. We have social workers now, so we can evaluate what they need. And when so we're able to get them the treatment that they need. But if they're not putting in good faith effort, if they're not trying, we reserve the right to still prosecute. And so there's some individuals we might get. We have one individual, mid-20s. He got picked up with a small amount of a drug. I can't remember exactly which one it was. I think it was one of those designer drugs. So he was evaluated, and it was determined there wasn't a substance abuse problem, just a knucklehead problem. He had never been in trouble before. He didn't qualify for substance use treatment because he just didn't have a substance abuse issue. He might have been heading that direction, but he didn't have that issue. And so we also created what we call deferred prosecution agreements. It's essentially a contract. Here, for a year, don't get in any trouble, and we won't prosecute you. But it's kind of a probation without the stigma of probation, without the conviction on their record where they go get a job and now they have to explain why they have this conviction. It's just an agreement. And so, and that's also included in that 8%. These are people who are walking down these deferred prosecution agreements. They're not getting rearrested, and they're able to keep their jobs or get jobs, go to school, and all those things. So yes, we do reserve the right to still prosecute if someone doesn't complete the program or chooses not to. Okay. Third question: what does the program actually do with the participants? For example, provide classes, assignments, treatments, other activities. So as I alluded to initially, we now have MSWs in our office, social workers who can provide targeted referrals and case management to services like substance use treatment, housing, jobs, all the things that I talked about. We can do check-ins, and that's one thing that I really think has added a new layer or dynamic to our office, is now that we have social workers, because you got a bunch of attorneys running around. We just don't know how to do this stuff. And so now we have social workers who can connect them with this treatment, the whether it be housing or different organizations that they need. And it's been we're very happy with where things are going at this point. Fourth question that I received: who actually conducts the program? I've talked about that, but I will expand on that quickly. That goes to our advisory committee, and we're talking social workers, attorneys, physicians, police officers, teachers, organizations like the Urban League, and you name it. If there's an organization that we're not in contact with, please let us know, because the great thing about this type of model is that there's no limit, there's no cap on the number of organizations you can have involved. And it's a two-way street. When we find out about High C, they are able to give jobs to individuals who've been in trouble before. And the good thing about them is, they're making about $15 an hour. Okay, that's not the greatest, that's not the most money in the world, but for someone who's been in trouble, and to have that job and it comes with full health care, I mean, that's not a bad thing. And so they reached out to us and said, hey, we're going to be a part of this. If you have people you can refer to us, we can get them jobs. And so, so I say this to everyone: if you know of an organization or there's work that you're doing that can help, let us know, because when we have something that's appropriate, we can contact you, and it's just another resource. And then lastly, on that question, we were awarded the LEAD grant, Law Enforcement Assisted Diversion, and that's staffed by 2 social workers. It's a federal grant, so it's paid by federal dollars. And what that does is we work with local law enforcement. We had 2 pilot departments in Jennings and Afton. We wanted to have a diverse, representing the county, if you will, since we could only start with 2. And what it does is it trains police officers on when it is appropriate to send individuals to some type of treatment as opposed to jail. Because, unfortunately, what we see is that if you're picked up on, let's just say, a small amount of marijuana, and a warrant is put out for you, you have to go to jail. You may go to jail for a few hours if you're able to afford the bond. You may go for a few days or a few weeks, but you're going to go to jail, and all of the collateral consequences that go with jail. And I think I mentioned this before, we're not talking about negative consequences that come because you've been in there for years. We're talking about days, and I'm a data guy. The data shows just a 3-day stay in jail increases the likelihood by 40% that you'll be back on another offense. 5 days, 50%. So what we're looking to do is get these individuals who don't need to see the inside of the jail, but they just need help, get them directly to the help. And so now we've actually had several other departments reach out and say that they wanted to participate in this program, so that we can get more referrals and get more people who it's appropriate, when it's appropriate, to sort to resources as opposed to incarceration. And are these programs, how are they, the budget for them, how are they paid and administered? So the LEAD program, as I already said, is supported by a federal grant. The remaining programs are either funded by those individual organizations. So for example, when we send an individual to Affinia Healthcare, we don't pay a dime because they're already funded. When they are sent to places with people who help with mental health, those who are in need of mental health care, that doesn't cost an extra dime. And then we have a few staff on our diversion program, and obviously that comes out of our budget. And then the last question I got was, are these programs in operation now? Are they just a long-term goal? And all these programs are fully functional. And again, we have enough data over a few years to show that we're going in the right track, or we're going in the right direction, I should say. But they are fully operational. So those are the questions I received. And so I've gotten through those. So I'm gonna open it up.
Well, I want to ask a question about the
Okay.
budget use budget. So if you're able to refer, that number of people out of the system, are you actually seeing budget savings then because they're not going into the system?
So that would, no. And the reason we're not is because this office was already understaffed before. So and we did an evaluation and a comparative evaluation, if you will. We looked at other prosecuting offices that are similarly situated to us. And Milwaukee County is one. They have a little bit less population and a little bit less crime than St. Louis County, but their office was almost twice the size of ours. And Baltimore, we have a community engagement program of like 1.5 people to one and a part-time person. They have like 10 in their office, and they have more trial staff. And so what happens is that, because we're already, our prosecutor to case ratio is already high, it helps because, those are less cases that our trial staff have to deal with, but then we didn't get extra budget for diversion. So all those cases go to the diversion team, and they still have to be, they still have to be worked. They still have to be, you have to make certain that the individuals are doing what they're supposed to do. And some of them, unfortunately, you may have to still prosecute. And so, so it takes relief from a little bit of relief from here, but it still puts it in other places. But just to give you an example, and we just recently did an analysis of our trial staff. On average, our prosecutors have about 200 cases per attorney. And let me just be clear, we're gonna get them. We're gonna prosecute the cases. When you look through the pandemic, and there was no roadmap to how to get through the pandemic. There hadn't been one in 100 years. None of us were around. But we still got through it without much of a hitch because we have a great team of men and women in the prosecutor's office, and they're gonna make it work regardless. So I wanna be clear. We want to get our budget. We want to get more funds. We've asked for more funds so we can get more prosecutors, and we've made the case why, but we're still going to get it done. But at the same, it just makes common sense. If you have lower caseloads, you can put more time into each case. Our warrant staff certainly needs to be larger. The warrant staff is the staff that when police make arrests, they bring their warrant packet, if you will, to our attorneys who evaluate whether there's enough to prosecute and what the charge should be. Well, we have five attorneys in our warrant staff. And I want to keep this in mind. We get on average anywhere from about 10 to 12,000 referrals from law enforcement a year. And we have 6 dedicated attorneys. And then for the overflow, we have to assign them to our trial staff who are already at 1 attorney per 200 cases. We're going to get it done, but you can see why I'm bullish on, hey, if we're serious about public safety, then let's be serious about prosecuting these cases and giving the support to the men and women in that office who are prosecuting these cases. And so, we're plowing forward.
I have a kind of comment and a question. I was a juror before in Los Angeles and New York.
Mhm.
And in New York, there was a Japanese woman judge, and in New York, the floor of everyone. I went to England to Old Bailey. That's mentioned, of course, in Charles Dickens' Dombey and Son, very famous court in England. And there were only English men as judges, and I was shocked. But I went, I was over 20 years old, but I came back because my cousin, my son's godfather, was a professor at Kane, and he organized a group to go to England to look at a program for people who had been in prison and were being released, early release program. And what I noticed is that I was shocked because it seemed to be much more advanced considering what my previous experience at courts. And what they allowed for prisoners or for people who were, like what you're saying, is to immediately leave the prison if it were a low offending crime.
Mhm.
But if it were, and so in those cases, even some of the higher offending, they had to have a job, I mean, they had to have a job. And they helped them with the trade. They had to have some kind, there was plumbing, computer engineer, they looked at their background. So I don't know if they have anything like that. I didn't notice anything like that quite in the United States, but I was just like 4 years ago in England and London. And I was really surprised that they also had a very low rate of recidivism. Very few were returning because they had someone to oversee the program and they also had a job. They were not allowed to leave or to be sentenced to be suspended unless they had a job and they had achieved a certificate.
Mhm.
But I just thought about that program of them matching the job and some kind of therapy if necessary. I don't know if they have anything like that here or if it's in the, if it's can be considered or something like that. But it reminded me of what you were saying.
Yeah, I think there's some things that we can do better with respect to previously incarcerated individuals. And, it's interesting because I'm on the side where we put them in the prison. But also we have, if we're serious about public safety, then we have to look at it holistically. And people with jobs commit less crimes. People with education commit less crimes. So before recently, when we had said we don't want prisoners getting education, it may sound good as a blurb on the TV. That might look good as a talking point, but it doesn't make us safer. It actually makes us less safe. When an individual who, and I'm telling you, we see these cases, there are individuals who are making thousands of dollars on the streets. I mean, they are just making a killing with this illegal, dangerous thing. We've all seen enough TV shows, you know what I'm talking about. So they go to prison, which is how it generally ends, either prison or worse. And they come out, and now they couldn't get an education in jail. They can't get a decent paying job because we're not the best at once someone pays their debt to society about saying, okay, you paid your debt, so let's let them make a living. And so now they can only get a job in fast food or bagging groceries. And then we wonder why the temptation is there for them to go back to those the illegal activity that was making thousands and thousands of dollars. And so I'm going to use my experience because I haven't been to London, but I did get an opportunity to visit Germany and observe the way they do it. And so they have a tiered system like us, but it's different. I'm going to say better, but I'll wait and build up to that. So essentially, they have their whole mindset is from day one, from the day someone walks into the prison, they are preparing them to get out. So they not only are encouraged to get jobs. Now, obviously, we're not talking about murders or anything like that. They're encouraged to get jobs. They have individuals who sit with them and plan out. So they are sending money home. They're saving money and they are budgeting. And so when they do get out, they actually have, they've been supportive. They've been supporting their families. They have money, some money saved up. And when we got to this prison, I swear, I didn't know it was a prison. I mean, it looked like these apartments that like I would live in. Like when we pulled out, I was like, these are pretty nice. When are we getting to the prison? I know we're here. And so, we're walking around. The ratio was about, I'm pretty sure it was like 80 prisoners per one guard. And we were just walking around. I mean, the prisoners are walking by us. Initially, we didn't know they were the prisoners. But the whole idea is when you treat people like people, they're gonna respond like people. They got weekend passes to go home. they had, if they were able to get a job, which their justice services, whatever they're called, helped them get jobs. And so they would be able to leave and come back and get a job. And their recidivism rates just ridiculously low. And again, obviously that's not appropriate for everyone. They didn't do that with your serious and violent offenses, but we did visit one of their, which would have been equivalent to the maximum penitentiaries or where the serious offenders are. And I want to give you a quick anecdote. So we're walking and we see this prisoner, and he's mad. He's clearly mad. He's speaking in German. Were we in Germany? Yeah, we were in Germany because we went to Portugal too. And so he's clearly upset. And the guard is talking to him and eventually walks him back. And so the guard comes back and he's kind of laughing. And he's like, well, he was cooking in the common area, but with you all coming, we told him he had to get back in the cell. So he was upset because his food was going to burn. And what we noticed, what stuck out to me is that the security guard just talked to him, walked him back. They didn't rush him. The lights didn't start blinking, the red light, that didn't go off. And even in that particular setting, they treated these individuals like people. And again, if you treat people like animals, they're gonna behave like animals. Because keep in mind, most people who go to prison aren't there for life. They're gonna come back and re-enter society at some point. And we gotta ask ourselves, what type of person do we want coming back amongst us? Someone who is just who has been treated with the trauma that we've seen in our prisons, or someone who has been, at least they had to do their time. And let me just be clear, if you have to go to jail and you're able to get an education, there's not going to be a long line of people trying to get in jail. So I don't like to hear that argument, oh, well, we're just making it too much. No one wants to go to jail. That's why when people get locked up for serious crimes, they have to go on suicide watch, because there is a significant portion of inmates who kill themselves because no one wants to be there. So let's just keep that in mind. What I'm suggesting is it's a public safety issue. If we prepare people to re-enter society and give them the tools to do it, we're less likely to be victims. We don't even have to focus on their recidivism rates. I don't want to be a victim. I don't want my family to be victims. And so let's give the tools that individuals need, the opportunities to keep those recidivism rates low. Yes, sir.
Let me add to your German experience.
Amy.
Let me add to your German experience. It's not as if in Germany there are not the other. There are brown people in Germany coming from across the Mediterranean and the Middle East. There are people coming from Europe, Eastern Europe, with their accents. So those prison guards and the whole legal system in Germany, they're not blind. They see the different publics they have to handle. And one way or another, they seem to be capable of not differentiating between the bad guy and the other guy. They seem to be more level in the way they treat the people. Unlike here in some areas where the color of your skin will determine how you get treated.
And I'll say this, I want to be fair. There's a lot of things we do right here. And you name the area, the region, the place, we can find these kind of atrocities and just immoral stuff. So I don't want to make this seem like, oh, we're just terrible here. No, I think overall, I think we do it better than most. But I think because of a history that they have come to grips with, and I would even suggest stared in the face and said, we're going to do better. This approach was as a result of that, of learning from those past mistakes. And I will tip my hat to them in that regard, that this approach came from, hey, we've made our mistakes in the past, so how can we get it right and follow the data to make certain that we're getting it right. And that's something that I think we're seeing a resurgence of in this country, but I think we need to keep our eye on the ball and make sure that we are getting past the politics, because we politicize everything in this country. And I just think that there's some things that should not be politicized. The criminal justice system should not be politicized. Let's look at what is the most effective way to go about it and do it. Healthcare should not be politicized. We're going to take care of our own, let's take care of our people and, you know, and leave it there. But yeah, so there's some things that they're doing that I was really impressed with. And I think there's some opportunities here.
I just want to add on one thing too about the program in London.
Uh-huh.
And that is that, again, the prisoners and the guards dressed in regular clothes, so there's a humanizing of what you're saying, in London, which I noticed, because I was kind of surprised they didn't have like prison issued clothing, they had regular clothing. And there was a little bit of a camaraderie between the guards and the prisoners, which I didn't expect
Yeah, I
in
mean,
London. I don't know if it's all the prisons, but in the London we visited.
I think all of those things go to the point of, you know, we got to treat people like people.
Yeah.
And again, most of them are getting out. Yes, ma'am.
Were the prisons owned by the government or were they privately owned?
They were government run. They were not privately owned.
Because I think that's part of our problems.
I agree.
It shouldn't be a profit
I agree.
operation.
And I'll amend my statement. We shouldn't politicize them and we shouldn't make them for profit. And I could not agree more. And that's a big part of the problem, because if you start creating this industry and jobs are being created, well, now you got to sustain those jobs. That's when you hear about the school to prison pipeline, you know, and that's something that we need to do a lot better in this country.
Was the German experience, was that commonplace or that experimental, just a certain facility?
No, that's their, so when you look at so they have their levels of confinement just like we do, but you know, their minimum compared to our minimum is just completely different. And it's what I described. You know, these were apartments essentially, and we're walking around and, you know, and prisoners are walking past us without any, you know, no security or anything like that. There was no safety issues. Now, obviously at the I don't know what you call it, but more similar to our maximum security. Yeah, there was more, it was more secure, obviously, but it still was different. And I've been in both types. You know, I've seen, you know, I've visited maximum security prisons here. And if I hope to never see like that, I never be in the business end. But if I was, I would absolutely prefer to be there. There was just a mindset of we're going to treat these people like people. I'm sure there's some things they could do better too, but just on from a big picture standpoint, I saw the difference and it was striking.
So you mentioned the pandemic and kind of some of the issues that have come out of the justice system. I've heard stories about the increase in crime in the city. Can you talk a little bit about what has happened in the county?
So, interestingly enough, it depends on what type of crime we're talking about. Homicides across the country are up 30%. And so the county is in line with that. And many experts believe it has a lot to do with the pandemic. And I'll give you an example. The summertime, we always see a spike, and not just us, everybody sees a spike. Young people are out of school and we see a spike in violent crimes. So now imagine a year where there's pretty much no school and across the country. And so, yeah, we saw a spike in homicides, assaults, and I'll even add this, that increase, a significant part of it, about 4,000 of them, of the violent crimes were gun crimes. And so as we've seen the loosening of gun laws and the influx of more guns, we are seeing more crimes with guns. And Missouri not only has loosened gun laws, and let me just be clear, I don't know where any of you are on this. I am not politicizing it. I am stating a fact and I'm stating my position. So I don't want anyone leaving here like, oh, he's this or that. No, I'm just stating my position. So here's the problem, is that Missouri, we have not only loosened gun laws, anybody can just get them now. You can carry them pretty much anywhere. And there you can put a sign up and hope people respect that sign. And if they don't, there's not going to be any serious consequences because the law is just not allowing it. Then you add the stand your ground laws. Now, prior to the stand your ground laws, if you were in a position where you could reasonably get away, the law said, get away. If it's reasonable. I'm not saying, I'm standing here, someone walks in with a gun, it's not reasonable to think I can get away from this distance. And then I can defend myself. But if I hear someone calls me and says, hey, on the other side of the building, nowhere near you, someone has a gun, then get away. That's the safest thing to do. Well, now the stand your ground laws, no, you don't have to go anywhere at any point, and you can use whatever force that you need, and not the force that is appropriate to the force that you are meeting. And so with law enforcement, they have a continuum of force. So therefore, the force that they use is based on the force coming at them. So if someone comes with a fist, then generally they'll use taser or something like that. If someone has a gun, then obviously they're going to use deadly force as well. So now that just makes it so difficult for us to prosecute cases because everyone says the same thing. I felt threatened. Everyone says the same thing. Do you remember did you all hear about the Show Me murder a few years ago that happened at Show Me's in Florissant? Okay, so we had these two gentlemen, and you can look this up. They were arguing, and this is just, they were arguing about the size of a dog. This is the argument. And so got a little heated. And so the gentleman who ended up being killed got up, patted the guy on the arm and said, hey, you know what? No hard feelings, and started walking out. So the gentleman who ended up shooting him had on a hoodie, because they have those pockets in the hoodie. And so you saw him put his hands in the pocket where the gun was. And as the guy's walking out, called him a name that I won't repeat in church. And so when the guy comes back, and they start to fight, immediately shoots him. So the argument is, well, I wasn't assaulted, which is technically true. But he after a heated argument, he knew this was going to happen and the situation was over. And so we charged that case, and we knew we probably weren't going to get a conviction, but we believed it was wrong. So we were going to charge it on principle and move forward. And we were right. It was a hung jury, meaning the jury did make a decision. And so we could have refiled it. And guess what? We were going to refile it. The defense and the defendant offered us a plea agreement where he did a few years in jail. We talked to the victims, and they also were on board with it. So at least we could get something. But that's an example of a case that is nearly impossible to prosecute because of the laws and the influx of guns that we had. So it definitely poses a challenge. Again, I'm not saying that I'm fine with the Second Amendment, but we need to be able to regulate who has guns. I mean, we can regulate who's driving a car. And listen, I got a 17-year-old. So I'm glad those regulations are in place. But if we can regulate that, we can regulate who votes. If you move from the city to the county, you got to re-register. You're still in Missouri, still in St. Louis, but you have to re-register. Most places don't do that. Okay, that's what you want to do, that's fine.
That's the savior law, right?
Exactly. But with a gun, it's like, hey, you're of age, have at it. And anyway. Yes.
Do you have any programs now where you or somebody work with folks into high schools or schools?
Oh, yeah, we actually, yeah, so we started our community engagement unit headed by Captain Clay Farmer. He was here with me last time. And that's one of the things that we've been emphasizing. Because, you know, when we talk about our philosophy, we also, subtext of that is there's things that we can do to help public safety in the short term. And then there's some investments we can make in the long term. And that would go in the latter category. Is that, yeah, we may not see the fruits of this for a while, but if we start reaching these young people, because those are always the highest demographic of serious and violent crime. And if we start reaching them younger and trying to not only expose them to different opportunities, but just talking to them, letting them know our experiences. And, you know, that's something that we've been doing. So yeah, I've been at a lot of schools from elementary to junior high, high school, and not just in the county too. We'll go to the city if invited. So.
Any final questions? Otherwise, we'll-
It seems, I have the impression that most employers will reject an applicant within prison. And that would be a major problem if we're getting that person back in the back. Is there anything that we can do about that? I don't know.
You know, and I've said this, and I've met with members of the business council, and something that I'll kind of reiterate to them is that until it becomes a thing to hire ex-offenders. Now, we know some jobs aren't appropriate. We get that. There's a lot of jobs that are fine. And I think it has to become a thing within the business community, a badge of honor to say, hey, when appropriate, we will hire ex-offenders. I think that we got to change that mindset, because you're right. If they're able to be hired, but they're not, but there's still kind of a moratorium, if you will. We're still in the same boat. And so that's something where I think, we all know people who own businesses or business leaders. I think we got to kind of push them, but push in that direction and educate them on why it's important to do that. And then as members of the public, we got to say, hey, we'll support businesses that do that. Oh, there's just like your union seal. Well, we got some seal because we will hire ex-offenders. And that's, maybe that's one of the things that we look for when we're shopping, to say, hey, I want to support a business that does that, because it does help.
I know
public
Rocky's
safety.
Dunkin' Donuts has that. There's several service industries that have that
Yeah.
acceptance.
I think that's,
Now, since nobody can get employees, that might be a
Everything's
perfect time.
negative. Loosen it up.
you think, right? Listen, because,
Can they come be a substitute teacher? I'd love to have that.
hey, so I like that Panera, and that's always been my safety food. Like, you can always get something healthy and you can always get good service. Not all the time now. And it's just because they don't have the employees. And so, yeah, I think it's a golden opportunity to do it, but we got to have the desire and will. And I think that starts with us. If we're showing up saying, hey, this is important to us as the public, they're going to get on board. If you're online and you're saying, hey, this matters to us on social media, this matters to us, then they'll get on board.
Well, thank you so much for being with us here today. Thank you for all the work that you do.
Thanks for having me.